Hey there, it's me Eden. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to my channel and visit my Patreon page for early access, link in the description. There were still people from school spilling out, and I gave her an alarmed glance, trying to get her to be quiet. Fortunately for me, Tanya and Lawrence appeared through the station entrance at that point, and we began the walk to Nikki's house before she could give any more of my secrets away. As we walked along, Lawrence looked as if he wanted to talk to me. I managed to keep ourselves in our original pairs all the way back, however. He had disturbed me enough already, and I certainly didn't want another deep and meaningful discussion of my feminine side. We were hardly through the door of the house before Nikki dragged me up to her bedroom to get my makeup done for the evening. Tanya similarly captured Lawrence in the living room downstairs. She sat me down in a wooden chair opposite her mirror and immediately went to work on my face. She began by attacking my eyebrows with a pair of tweezers, pulling out stray hairs from the bottom. I protested that it would make me look odd even when I wasn't Sarah, but she pushed these protests aside and continued. Eventually she seemed happy with her work, and I chanced to look at myself. The thing I noticed most was the angry red of the newly bare flesh under my new look brows. Nikki assured me this would subside before the evening, although my concern was more to do with when I got home that night. After this she began on the makeup proper. I hadn't actually worn that much since Saturday, managing to be Sarah without cosmetic assistance. Nikki seemed determined to make up for this oversight now. I was smothered in a thick layer of foundation, leaving my skin feeling greasy and odd. She proceeded to blush my cheeks till they looked as if they had been slapped, like Lawrence's earlier in the day. She then moved on to my eyes. I didn't fancy a repeat of the horrible scratching sensation that had accompanied this on Saturday, so, remembering that I had managed to put some on myself that same evening with a good deal less pain, I volunteered to do it myself. I regretted this almost straight away. Nikki went into ecstasy about my sudden enthusiasm for my feminine role, and kissed my forehead as she handed me the eyeliner pencil. With some reluctance, I leant forward to look at myself in the mirror as I applied the makeup to myself. It took some time, but eventually I thought it looked finished, and Nikki congratulated me on my work. She asked me if I wanted to do my own eyeshadow as well, but I refused, deciding against any more displays of cooperation. The eyeshadow seemed to take an age compared to Saturday. Instead of just using 2 shades, I was subjected to 4 different variants on the basic pink theme she had chosen, and the color was spread further across my eyes than just on the lids. Eventually she finished, and forced me to look at myself. I was surprised by the result. Together with the thinning of my eyebrows, and my own attempts at eyeliner, somehow my eyes now looked more feminine than ever. I turned my head from side to side to confirm this diagnosis, while Nikki beamed benevolently at my side. Then it was on to the mascara. She stroked my lashes with the brush, carefully turning them up at the ends, and then did the same on the other side. Without pause, my lips were next. She carefully lined them with a pink pencil, making sure that the outline she drew was considerably bigger than my true lips, and then began to fill the gap with a pale pink lipstick. Eventually satisfied, she finished off with a foul-tasting lip gloss that she told me would ensure that it didn't wear off. At this point I glanced at the mirror in horror. Other than my short, rather untidy hair, a very sophisticated and profoundly feminine Sarah was looking back at me. I blushed, but under the profusion of blusher and foundation, to no visual avail. Nikki then decided I needed another coat of mascara, and proceeded to apply it to me. Once she had done this, she produced something that looked like some medieval torture instrument. She explained that this was an eyelash curler, and to my dismay, clamped both sets of my eyelashes into it in turn. With a look of satisfaction, she told me to look at the effect. I was mortified. As well as looking a good deal longer because of the coloring, my eyelashes, particularly the top ones, curled back up on themselves towards the line of my newly thinned eyebrow. I began to panic that I wouldn't be able to take all this stuff off at the end of the evening, but Nikki assured me that she had some effective makeup remover that would preserve my masculinity for my parents. Next, Nikki decided I should have some nail varnish on my hands. I objected fiercely, but it seemed Anita had decided to tell her that I had tried some on myself already. This rather shot all my arguments against down, so I eventually held out my hand and allowed her to paint. One by one my nails turned what I was told was a shell pink. She finished with one hand and began on the other, taking immense care to ensure that the varnish went on smoothly and did not run onto my skin. Just as I felt a sense of relief that this part of my preparation was over, she lifted the first hand again and proceeded to apply a second coat as well. At last it was done, but there was no respite, for Nikki immediately turned her attention to my clothes. I took off my boys' school uniform and was handed a preposterously feminine pair of knickers, in nylon with a printed pattern of bright red lips all over them, interspaced with the word kiss, in an elaborate script. On each hip was a large red bow, and a further one on the middle of the elastic at the front. Chastely, I asked Nikki to leave the room while I swapped them for my boxers. There seemed little point in trying to resist wearing them at this stage. Once they were on, she came back in and gushed about how much they suited me, how girly they made my bum look, and how nicely they hid my manhood. I was still reeling from this onslaught when she produced the bra. It matched the knickers perfectly, and she eagerly strapped it around me and fastened it. If anything, it was tighter than any I had worn before, and the hard bits around the cups at the front dug painfully into my chest. She told me how nice it looked, and then proceeded to pat it out with socks, pink ones, from her drawer. I looked at myself in the mirror, and saw what was now becoming the familiar sight of myself with boobs, albeit this time with red lips all over them. What was strange was that neither the sight nor the feeling was particularly strange after my experiences of the previous 3 days. In some ways it was almost like coming home to have breasts again. I was cross with myself for feeling this way, but could not deny it. While I was looking at myself, Nikki appeared behind me in the mirror grinning and holding a suspender belt. It too matched the knickers, and looking a little sheepish, Nikki confessed that she had bought me a matching set to make up for not having the bridesmaids one. I didn't know what to say. After my shopping trip with Anita the previous day, I had a much better idea of how much money this must have cost her, and told her she shouldn't have spent so much. She just told me it was worth it to see me in them, and handed me the belt to put on. Next of course came the stockings, which with some expertise I pulled up my legs and fastened. Nikki cooed about how lovely my legs were, and in spite of my protestations of innocence, thanked me for shaving them again. The dreaded dress was then taken from the wardrobe, and released from its plastic bag. She held it for me while I stepped in, and then carefully put the shoulders in place, making sure my bra was covered, before fastening the back. Now it was time for the shoes. Nikki produced a really strappy pair in a color to match the dress. The fastening was so complicated that I had to sit down and let her do it for me, as straps went over my instep and around my ankle. Once they were on, I stood up. They had a 3-inch heel, Nikki told me, which was rather larger than the boots I was used to, and I took some time to readjust myself. She made me pace up and down for a while, to check the length of my dress, and make sure I wasn't standing on the hem. Satisfied, she told me I looked beautiful. It suddenly occurred to me that my hair was still its normal short and untidy self. Anita had taken my wig home with her the day before after our shopping and cinema trip, and I had a panic that Nikki expected me to go out to the theater dressed as I was with a boy's haircut. She teased me a little by pretending that she had forgotten all about it, but then produced the wig from her school bag. Apparently Anita had given it to her that morning. She sat me back down on the chair, and proceeded to fuss with the wig, brushing it through and through until it had a real silky look. She pulled 2 strands from each side of my head and tied these together at the back, then, taking a 3rd strand from the back itself, made a tiny plait to hang down my back. She brushed my fringe down a little and then slipped a shiny silver hairband behind it. I looked on spell-struck as she worked. The last little bit of Steve had vanished, and a new, even more sophisticated Sarah had taken his place. I marveled at how elegant Nikki had managed to make me look just by simply changing my hair. "Do you like it?" she asked me. Unguardedly I replied, "You've made it look so different, it's beautiful." I nearly kicked myself for saying something so stupid. I had meant to say that it looked ridiculous, but somehow a different and more honest statement and filtered its way from my brain to my mouth. Nikki smiled in response. "Thanks," she replied softly. We went back down to the living room, where the newly rediscovered Lucy was sitting demurely and wide-eyed on the sofa, listening to Maxine talking animatedly about brush strokes. He smiled at me as I entered. "You look lovely." I smiled thinly back. "So do you," I responded blandly. I was beginning to get concerned about Lawrence's enthusiasm for his feminine alter ego, especially after his comment that we were both more like girls earlier that day. Nikki's mom came over to look me over. "Very nice," she commented, smiling at me. "You really do make a lovely young lady." I smiled back, out of politeness more than enthusiasm. Nikki proceeded to fix me up with some jewelry, a preposterously long pair of clip-on earrings that had long mock gold strands on them that dangled down onto my neck, and an assortment of rings and bangles. She wanted me to wear a necklace with 5 or 6 metal strands, but I refused, telling her I would rather wear my Sarah one. I put it on myself, not without difficulty. It served to remind me of Anita, absent though she was. I felt myself dropping into despair, imagining her with John that evening. It seemed so unfair. Once my jewelry was done, Nikki, Maxine and Tanya went upstairs to get ready, leaving Lawrence and I alone in the room, while Mrs. Simmons and Mrs. Luce went into the kitchen. "Are you all right, Steve?" Lawrence asked from the sofa, looking at me with genuine concern. "Yes, I guess so," I replied. "I expect you're missing Anita," he observed unhelpfully. I looked away towards the window, and thought again of her, being driven off in a car by the ghastly oaf John. "Maybe," I responded. "Your hair really suits you like that," he went on. "It looks beautiful. Are you going to wear it like that for the contest?" "I don't know. It's up to Anita," I replied, curtly. It wasn't that I felt particularly unfriendly to him, but his newfound ability to undertake a girly talk was discomforting. Please subscribe my channel for the next part. And visit my Patreon page for early access.